Lots of people in here tonight. All right. I see it's recording. Phil, do you want me to go ahead and start?
Yes.
All right. Cool. Hey, I'll say this first off. Thanks for coming, everyone. I appreciate y'all showing up. This is a topic that I enjoy talking about, but never really put together a presentation. So I wanted to start with a little bit of just a intro to active defense and cyber deception. But before I start, I like interaction. So I want to encourage you guys to be super interactive in the chat. Funky's gonna help me go Q&A, chat, any questions that you guys have. But I encourage you to be interacting in the chat. It just makes it more fun. I'd love to be meeting in person and just be able to geek out and chat with you all, but instead we'll have to do that through Zoom chat. So first off, who's heard of cyber deception and active defense? You guys can just blow up some ones in the chat, Twitch style, whatever you want. But who's heard of? We got ones in the chat. Yeah. Who's heard of cyber deception? We got two so far. All right, let's do it the reverse. Who's never heard of active defense or cyber deception? Put whatever you want in the chat. I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just curious. Got a 0. All right. Whatever you want. Perfect. Thank you, Travis. Cool. So yeah, I was actually surprised. So we were doing a talk with the North Texas Cybersecurity Meetup last month, and Juno was sharing a talk on game theory. And we were just going through a lot of stuff. I'm not even going to pretend to reiterate all the things she talked about. There was way too much math in there for me, but we started talking about ways how to do offensive and defensive cyber positions on game theory and how to work through that. And so the only thing I could think of from a deception perspective or from a defense perspective was cyber deception. And I was surprised during that conversation how many people have never really heard about it. And so I was like, maybe I'll just do a talk on intro to active defense and cyber deception. That's kind of where I told Phil, is like, you know what, let's just do it. So hopefully some of the stuff is new to you guys and you can get a little something out of it. So first up, what is active defense? I like to Google things and steal things from the internet. So I quoted this and cited my sources here. An active defense is the use of offensive actions to outmaneuver an adversary and make an attack more difficult and to carry out, slowing down and derailing the attacker so they cannot advance or complete their attack. Increase the probability that the the attacker will make a mistake and expose their presence or reveal their attack vector. So that's kind of broad. This is from Ativo Networks. They're one of the larger enterprise deception vendors, if you will. And so it's this idea of active defense. It's not hacking back. That's not what we're doing here. I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not going to get in the fine lines of what constitutes hacking back or not. There will be some things on here we'll talk about that I will say, maybe a little fun, but you can use at your own judgment. But not looking to give you legal guidance on what you are and are not allowed to do. But this is using active defense. It's using active methods in a defensive way to, like they say, outmaneuver the adversary, make it difficult for them to do their objectives, slowing them down, derailing them onto something else, and also getting some high value alerts that you can act on, and maybe reveal a little bit of their presence or reveal some of their acting behavior. Now, what is cyber deception? Again, a nice little quote that I stole here from Rapid7. Deception technology is a cybersecurity defense practice that aims to deceive attackers by distributing a collection of traps and decoys across the system's infrastructure to imitate genuine assets. And if an intruder triggers a decoy, then the server will log it, monitor it, all their attack vectors, utilize it throughout the duration of their engagement. So it's a way to put, fake various things that we're going to dive into here in a few minutes all around your network to pick up and detect attacker behavior and even insider threat. So what's some benefits of deception? Just put a couple here. These aren't a complete list, but it decreases attacker dwell time on the network. So, in this situation, if you have an attacker that comes in, they hit a honeypot, they hit some sort of honey token that you have out there, you can decrease their attack time by detecting it, gathering that information, putting block on. You can proxy their connection of whatever they're trying to connect on into a honey net or a more higher action honey pot that you have kind of segmented away, and just waste their time, which gets them essentially not out of your network but isolated. You can expedite the average time to detect and remediate. I've seen this firsthand. When you have honey tokens, honey pots, honey everything all over your network that no one else should really touch, if you do a good job of deploying these things throughout your network, these should be things that rarely, if ever, are people going to touch or interact with. Therefore, when you do get a detection, it's usually pretty quick to remediate the threats. It's pretty quick to just expedite the whole detection of said bad actor. Reduce alert fatigue. Kind of went over that with the last comments, where we're just filled with alerts all the time, everywhere. Anytime you work in a SOC, you're just going to be dealing with 95% false positive in some situations where you are just tired of staring at alerts. You may get one alert a day that's out to something valuable. So when you're working with a lot of the deception technologies, whether it be open source or enterprise grade or whatever, these are pretty high value alerts. They're usually pretty actionable if you've done it correctly, and therefore reducing your alert fatigue. And then it produces metrics surrounding indicators of compromise, get those IOCs from them, maybe collect their TTPs, their tactics, techniques, and procedures, and just gives you some more information that you can gather to say, okay, how is this actor working in our network? Does that match any known actors that are out there? What IOCs am I collecting? What IPs am I collecting? What user agent strings am I collecting that I can then go hunt my network and potentially find other places that they will be, or even potentially block their activity, whether that be manual or automatic. And then I want to jump into types of deception. Before I do this, anyone have any questions? QA in the chat, wherever you want. Anybody have any questions so far? Any fun ideas or projects that you've worked on before I start to go through all the different types of deceptions that I'm aware of?
PoppaShell, I haven't seen any questions come across yet, but I did have one kind of question is around, I mean, you mentioned the cyber deception and kind of, you mentioned honeypots and things of that nature. Do you feel like when you're building these cyber deceptions now, is it good to have like a story to tell, or how are you trying to mimic your network? What's kind of like the best practice when you're trying to build out a true cyber deception?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, I definitely believe that you should. And let me define here. So there's a difference. I didn't want to get too crazy deep, but that's a fantastic question. And I know why you asked that, so thank you for the softball. But yeah, when you're talking enterprise defense, right? When you're an enterprise that you're responsible for, it's not just your home. You're not just goofing around and trying to collect fun intel. You want to work on what you can call your deception story. You want to build that out as deep as you possibly can. And what that consists of is what he was referring to, which is thinking through it, right? You don't just want to put out a honeypot and call it, honeynet, honeypot, come click me, right? You're going to want to look at the grand scheme of all your naming schemes out there, and you're going to want to think of some good, just slight variations of your existing environment that look just a little bit off, and be able to stage out your honeypots to look a lot like your environment. You also want to make them look a little extra juicy, right? I don't know if juicy is the right word, but I like it. You want to make those look attractive is probably a better word. Make it something they want to click on, right? You can deploy stuff that looks like updated, patched systems, and you can update a few that are drop a few in that are, Windows 7 SP1 super vulnerable. A lot of things that you can do to build that story. We'll get into more stuff with tokens and documents and other things that you can do. But yeah, I guess to answer the question, yeah, you definitely want to build that deception story to look as close as your environment as you can to blend in and not make it super obvious. There's even a talk a few years ago at Blackout, I believe, where they were talking about what they call it. It's like Honey Buster. I forgot what they called their tool that they built. It was the guys from Symmetria. That company I don't believe is any longer, but I believe it was Symmetria that gave the talk on how they can detect honeypots in different environments and talking about how to avoid them, how to detect them, all those things. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A. Am I familiar with Kustaka by Jared Falkins? I am not. I am not familiar with that one. I apologize. And then Wirefall, what are your thoughts on Honey SSH keys? I've never messed with SSH keys particularly. I have messed with anything from low, medium, and high interaction SSH honeypots. Those are super fun. I'm actually going to talk about some of those and kind of my first experience with the SSH honeypots.
PoppaShell, I think juicy was a great word for what you were describing there, for those kind of things. And it looks like we had a comment as well. Lee Berg had mentioned Javelin Networks for the honeypot
There you
buster.
go. Yeah. Okay, cool. I knew there was one called Honey Buster, and there's another one. Javelin they got acquired by Symantec, I believe. No offense, but I stopped following them after that point, I believe. But they had some really cool stuff around Active Directory deception. That's pretty stinking cool when they first came out. And they may have a super awesome product with Symantec. I have no idea. All right, cool. Good questions, good interaction. Keep those coming, and I will try my best to answer them. I'm by no means a deception wizard. I just like to goof around with a lot of this stuff, and I've done some enterprise grade things as well. So types of cyber deception. So getting into this a little bit, this is how I first got into honeypots, is doing just SSH medium to high interaction honeypots. And I put a couple on the screen. I didn't do a lot of tools that I put on the screen. I'm going to show you guys some here as I pivot in a second to IVM. But honeypots, these are just systems that are out there that are fake. They could be full-on systems. They can just interact from all sorts of levels. So like a low interaction honeypot is just going to be something that when you connect to it, you get like a fake banner. It throws a response back to them, but it never really lets them fully interact or log in or do a whole lot. But they initially hit that SSH or a web-based, Windows-based. It doesn't matter. Whatever you have staged out there that looks attractive that they can hit, either whether it's from out on the World Wide Web or internally. Kind of up to you, but I just called it a couple fun ones. So Kippo, let me switch over real quick to my other screen, and I will jump into this. All right, can you see my ADHD screen?
We can, and you had another question real quick if you want to answer this next question, which was around, can you guess the percentage of enterprises that actually deploys cyber deception?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would like to be I don't know. I would like to be naive and say that I think it was a high percentage, but if I'm realistic, I think it's a rather low percentage from what I've seen and heard. I wish it was higher. I think I'm not going to sit there and give you rewrite the CIS top 20. But I definitely think when you're done with the first 5, that is a great time to potentially jump in there and deploy some deception. At least be familiar with it, play with it. There's some that are just so stinking easy to implement on like a nice day where you just need to be sidetracked or distracted for a day. I think we all kind of have those days. But I think it's probably a pretty low percentage. I don't know what number I'd put on there. I'd probably say 20% maybe. I don't know. And yeah, I see the question. Yeah, it's a lot of work to do honeypots. Yes and no. I agree with that to an extent. And then there's also some ways to not make it as much work, but you get what you pay for. And I'll get into that a little bit. I wanted to dodge some of the enterprise stuff, but I will mention some enterprise grade stuff as well, just for fun. I just won't comment very deep on some of those. Yeah, I think it can be super easy actually to deploy deception and get some initial easy wins. It's probably easier than you think. Hopefully, maybe that's what we'll discover throughout this talk. All right, Funky, can you see my ADHD screen?
I can.
All right, we're gonna log in with a. All right, this is the password. Would anybody like to guess in the chat what the password is?
ADHD, 1, 2, 3, 4.
ADHD caps. It's just ADHD, no caps. I'll get into what ADHD is. Actually, you know what? I'll do that in a second. I'll stick on honeypots for just a second, and then I'll switch to what ADHD is. All lowercase ADHD is the password to this platform, though. But talking about honeypots, so Kippo's the first one that I was exposed to, and I'll give you guys. I got a screenshot resources screen at the very end where you can just screen cap it and look at these. But when I first got into kind of deception in honeypots, I watched a talk from I think it was DEF CON 23. It's DEF CON 23, and it was the people I think that do this HoneyNet project. The guy's name, I cited him at the end, and now I'm a jerk. I can't remember. Elliot Brink is his name. He did a talk in one of the villages at DEF CON 23, I believe, and he talked about basically just getting he did for a whole year where he ran Kippo honeypots, just light to medium interaction honeypots all over the place in the web, and has collected a bunch of really cool stats, details about what attackers are doing, collected so many passwords, it wasn't even funny. He had attackers that would connect to his SSH honeypot and then immediately start installing tools and then calling out to their wherever they host their tools. And most of the time, these web-based file systems are wide open. They use HSF servers, I believe is the acronym for that. And they would have all their malware on there, but they would also have text files that had usernames and passwords for all the different SSH systems out there that they've compromised. So he would go in there and just sanitize off all the passwords and create himself a gigantic password list from his collection. But Kippo is a fun one. It's actually, if you go to honeynet.org and you go to their projects like I'm here, it's actually one of their old projects is Kippo. So they've rolled that off. You see it's a medium interaction SSH honeypot. They've rolled it off since then. There's another one called Cowrie that is actually a still live project that took Kippo and added a lot more to it, made it more easy to use in a lot of cases and expanded upon it. So that one's a fun one too. So Kippo and Cowrie were the first ones I messed with from an SSH perspective. But I was looking through their projects. I haven't played with it for a while, or some of their projects. So this one looks fun. DocPot. DocPot is just being able to deploy high interaction SSH honeypots, but it's using click go. My connections doo-doo maybe. But yeah, it'll spin up Docker instances. It'll spin them up and down. So when someone connects, it's going to NAT their connection over, create a live SSH connection, and let them into that container and let them goof around and collect a bunch of fun information on them, let them do whatever they want. It's all usually set up in such a way where they really can't do a whole lot. It's actually pretty entertaining. You can go back. I know on Kippo, you can actually go back and watch a screen recording of the attacker doing their thing. You can just watch whatever they're typing in. A lot of times it's automated. You can see it flying by on the screen, and you know that it's automated, just a bot. But sometimes you'll see people interact. And he has a video I think he shows on his talk where you can see someone creating a new username and they're getting frustrated because every time they create a new username, it'll finish the form, and then it'll go back and they'll try to use that username and it'll say it doesn't exist, and they just get frustrated. And I think he showed someone trying to create a username like 5 times over and over again. And they started like typing curse words at the computer in their session. It was pretty entertaining. I don't want to get too distracted on this, but this is a good source. HoneyNet project. Go in here, check it out. Play with the old Kippo. Go download Cowrie. Play with that. There was another project that I can't remember the name of it. I'm going to try to pull it up real quick because it was a fun one. I doubt it's still supported. What was that called? Tango. Tango was like a whole nice wrapped up GitHub. Yeah, was it GitHub? A Plura Tango. Anyways, it would spin up a Cowrie honeypot or multiple Cowrie honeypots, and it would help you to easily pump all those into a Splunk server, and you could get it all nice and aggregated into Splunk and logging. And so that was a pretty fun one too, Tango. I don't know if it's still supported. I haven't checked it out in quite a few years, to be honest with you. Let me cover what ADHD is, and I'll pivot back to my slides. So ADHD, this is put out by Black Hills InfoSec at first. Now it looks like it's maintained under their other kind of sister company, Active Countermeasures, but it's the Active Defense Harbinger distribution. And this is like Kali for deception. Really fun platform that you guys can go download, and girls. And it's on ADHD 7, I think is what they have right now. Let's see. Yep. You can, or not 7, geez, 4. You can go down there, the OVA, spin it up on a VM and kind of poke through it, but it's a whole platform. So you get in here, you fire up Firefox, and they will have the credentials for everything for you, all the different tools that they have. They'll have credentials, all the documentation. You can click through annoyance. They have a bunch of annoyance type honeypot deception stuff. They have canary tokens, which we're going to look at a little later. Honey badger is a funny one that I'll mention. Web bugs, a lot of different tools in here. And each one of these, if you click on, let's see, Cowrie, since we were just talking about this, if you click on Cowrie, it's going to go through. It's going to say, here's the project. Here's, probably the fork off of the original. Actually, there's their fork, and this one goes through all the details. How do you install it? How do you run it? All their documentation is here for you, and all contained here to get you up and going pretty quickly. So this is ADHD, and I'm going to pivot back and forth with ADHD a little bit to kind of show you some of these different tools. Let's switch back to the slides and unpause. Cool. Honey nets. So honey nets, these are what I'd say is harder to maintain. I know someone said earlier it's a little bit hard to maintain deception in honeypots, and I agree with you. It can be, just depending on what you do. Yes, it is a large zip. It's like 6 gigs. More than that, I think. But honey nets is where you can essentially take some of your honey pots and you can redirect people into your honey net, and it'll take a little time and getting it set up correctly. But you want to be able to be on your internal network or external, whatever you want, and you want to be able to track them into that initial honey pot, and then be able to redirect them into what you'll call a honey net. This will be an isolated VLAN. In that VLAN, you will just have all sorts of fun things for them to click around and play at. You control them. It can be a trolley honey net. So you can just throw all sorts of obnoxious things in there and just make it super obvious that they are in a troll playground, or you can make it be very attractive and real looking, and like we were talking about earlier, just really building out your deception story and keep them flopping around all throughout your honey net for a very long time. And you can implement just about everything we're talking about this evening into your honey net. But that's the idea. It's an isolated VLAN that you will get them to initially bite the hook, and then you will redirect their traffic into this isolated VLAN and just set them there like they're in a real network and just let them go to town. All the while, you're collecting IOCs, you're collecting TTPs, you're getting all the information on them while they get to play and waste their time not hacking your systems.
So, PoppaShell, without getting too deep into that cyber deception story you talked about, what would make a good cyber deception story?
I think that really depends on your network, to be honest, and what it looks like for you. Right? I mean, I think that's the biggest thing, is making it look like. What's the funniest? Sorry, I got distracted by an anonymous question. What's the funniest thing you've done with a honeypot? I'll answer that in a second. So yeah, I think it goes back to some of the same comments, which is just make it look, in my opinion, make it look as real as possible and make it blend into what your environment looks like. Give them lots of things to waste their time, because essentially that's what you want to do. And I'll get into the argument if anyone wants to bring it up about not pissing off the attacker. But I have some comments on that and some opinions there. But I think you make it look as much as like your network as you can. If you run a hybrid network, make it look like a hybrid network. Let them pivot around a little bit. If it looks like an on-prem typical network, make it look like that. If you're all cloud, stage that sucker out and AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, wherever you're at, and make it look like the rest of your network. Make it as believable as possible. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think, as we've done cyber deception for our company, that it's really about knowing the jewels, knowing the crown jewels for your company, and kind of building around that, or building a fake path to something like that, or trying to protect with cyber deception at the same time. We talk about deception, and it can be a very protective measure at the same time as just being able to collect data, but also keeping the bad individuals, the attackers, away from your crown jewels and taking them somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's up to you. That's why I don't want to get too deep, because I don't want to like build someone's deception story for them. I think it's different from everybody, and like you said, kind of building into what's right for you, right? Do you want to attract them towards what your crown jewels are, if you will? What is it? Is it company secrets? Is it credit cards? What is it that you're trying to keep from them, and do you want to misdirect them somewhere else, or do you want to you know get them to jump right in and say, oh, here's a bunch of juicy credit cards, start downloading these, or here's all of our secrets, and just troll them after they get deep enough. I don't know. It's kind of up to you. What is the funniest thing that you've done with a honeypot? Um, I'll broaden that out. No, do I want to go there? I feel like I have to save this one for Rick's part 2 of scamming the scammers. It kind of blends some waters, some stuff that he and I have worked together on. That was quite hilarious, but I feel like I can't use that one because I'll ruin his upcoming part 2. No pressure. Get that done with. I don't know. The funniest thing, honestly, that I've done is just staging. I had about 5 SSH honeypots all over the place, collecting everything into Splunk and being able to go back and log into each one of those and watch and replay people's attacks. And I don't know, it's necessarily funny, but I just enjoyed going back there. And it was like at nighttime, it was a fun hobby, just searching through and replaying all the different sessions. And I would quickly, bypass the ones that are obviously bots. I try to find the real people because it would just be hilarious to watch people just struggle, keep trying to install their tools, create new users. Some of the funny things you can do with Kippo and Cowrie is you can actually, it's quite customizable. There's configs in it that you can customize. And so if they get in there and run a command to particularly see like what type of specs, that was actually a super common one, by the way. And you can actually pay attention to attack trends to then continue, like we were talking about, build your deception story. Now, in this case, I was completely on the edge of the network. This was not for my company or any other previous company. Purely just a hobby. It was all in the cloud. It wasn't off my own home network because I'm not that dumb. But just going back and trying to watch what the attackers were doing was both entertaining and eye-opening, because I noticed that a bot would come in and they would always run the same commands to see what type of specs, what type of system were they running on, and if it wasn't a beefy enough system, they were out. And so in like a Kippo and a Cowrie, you can actually go in there and modify the configs. You can tell from a particular config, when they run this command, this is what they're going to return back standard out. And I would lie to them and say that they're on a system with 128 cores and 50 million gigs of RAM and just all these specs. And then I started noticing that they would stay around longer. Then they'd start downloading their tools and they would go further. But with all the automation of bots, if you didn't have those little key indicators of things that they would start to check when they got in, and if I weren't lying to them about those details, they wouldn't stick around. They just bail. And then I made those slight changes and kept modifying them as I go. And I would find that these bots would stay longer and longer. Same thing with real attackers that weren't automated. And that was really fun to get to see. I'm going to try to run through some of these QA while we're paused. So maybe it's a stupid question, but all this data you collected about the attackers, what do you do with it? Is it useful for anything? Initially for me, it was useful just to gain insight. I was learning. I was fresh in InfoSec. I was like a year in. I was just trying to learn as much stuff as I could. And it was very insightful for me to see all the different types of attacks that were out there. I got bored with Linux attacks and I was more in a Windows environment. So I started trying to stage out more Windows-based honeypots and different types of honey tokens so I could collect more Windows-based things. A lot of times I found that even though they were attacking SSH honeypots with those HTTP file servers that I mentioned earlier, sometimes there'd be Windows binaries on there too, and I would collect those and sandbox those and grab indicators of compromise. It's really for my own learning. And then if you talk in enterprise, yes, the data that I'm used to getting, the way that I've deployed deception is very, very useful because luckily to say so far, it's just been pen testers that we've actually gotten hits off of because everything that was done internally. We don't have anything hanging off the edge. There's some new stuff I would like to play with, and I'm gonna actually get into a little bit later that could be more public, but still designed to be high fidelity alerts that no one should really be messing with, but we'll see. I kind of got to experiment with that. But when you collect information, you get your attacker on there and they goof up and they just YOLO run a scan in your environment, and you have honeypots just chilling all over your network, and your alerts light up like a Christmas tree. Well, if you have that automated, go block the box, isolate it off your network, and pow, pen tester has a bad day. Or if you just want to let it go passive, you don't want to block but continue to collect information on them. It's really fun to send your pen tester all the different things you watch them doing, where they spent like an hour on a fake SQL server trying to brute force it, and turns out you set it to SASA, and then they dump all the database and see it's a bunch of trolly fake users, and they're like, crap, I just wasted 45 minutes doing that. Hopefully that answers the question. Do you find the IOC TTPs from honeypots helpful for your detection engineering efforts? I guess I kind of answered that just now. Yes, I do find them helpful. Unfortunately, actually, let me restate that. I was going to say, unfortunately, I haven't seen anything real besides attackers. That's actually not unfortunate. That's very fortunate. But I think the same thing would play out. I can see where they're coming from, what they're using, what type of attacks they're doing, what protocols. If we have a bunch of honeypots out there doing all sorts of different protocols, you can see, okay, are they focused on one particular protocol? Do they have one particular interest right now that they're focused on? And what is that? Or are they just scanning everything? They're just running a big noisy nmap scan where they're triggering every possible port and protocol that you have on the system. Just depends. Again, do these tools generate alerts or logs you can alert from real time? Do you respond right away or watch the point and laugh? Jim, a little bit of both on that one too. Yes and yes. So this depends on what you do. If you do open source, the person that talked about earlier being a little harder, if you do a lot of open source stuff, yeah, there's going to be more work that you're going to have to put in to get these to be more quick real-time alerting, versus if you just get it to write to a log and then you have a beats agent or whatever you're running that picks those logs up and then shoves those over to your SIM, and then maybe it takes 15 minutes, maybe it takes an hour to detect. It really just depends. There's some that you can set pretty quick and fast alerting on, or there's others it's a little bit of a dwell time. And then as far as like, do I immediately act or wait and laugh? Hard question. I've never acted on a real attacker other than a pen tester. Again, fortunately, pen tester is fun to sit and laugh. Real attacker, I'd probably, mess my pants a little bit and then try to quickly block and clean up. I don't know. It just depends. You always have to make that call. Do you sit and wait, or do you pull the plug? And usually that's not a singular decision that you make. Wirefall, if you're wasting the pen tester's time, aren't you wasting the company's money? That's a really good point, and I know where he's coming from. Wirefall's a pen tester and has been for probably longer than I've been alive. Just kidding. Yeah, to an extent, we don't typically let them dwell too crazy long before we notify them. Wirefall in the past, or in some cases we do, because there was one of the times where we did a pen test specifically to prove out how valuable having deception enterprise grade was in the environment. So in that case, where I said that I laughed and the person spent way too much time in a SQL honeypot, that was kind of the objective for that pen test, was proving out the value of how effective could it potentially be. When it's not something that they're purely focused on, proving out whatever deception we deployed, typically we're letting them know pretty quick, like, hey, we saw you, feel free to continue poking around like you were doing, but we saw you, put it in your report, and give me some cookies. All right, any question? Jeez, I shouldn't read the chat sometimes. Cool. Honey nets, covered that. Moving on. Honey docs, these ones are fun. These come in all sorts of forms, and I'm going to pivot back over to ADHD here in a second. But honey docs, these are in all forms. You can do PDFs, Word docs, spreadsheets, whatever you want to do. but the premise is you're creating these juicy documents, I'll stick with that term, or attractive documents that you can pepper all over your systems. Hang on, I gotta click a few buttons, so I'm not trying to multitask too hard. Do y'all see calorie again on ADHD?
Ooh,
What's that?
we do. We see
We do.
calorie.
All right, cool. Thank you. Just want to confirm I'm not like pausing my screen forever. So pivoting from honeypots, right, and honey nets, these are a little bit harder to do. Really deploying a ton of honeypots all over, managing them, keeping them up to date, doing all your isolation and all your automation around having a big, awesome honey net. I've never staged at a full honey net. That's just a lot of work. I'd love to get there, but that would be if I had literally one job and that was to focus on nothing but deception. Unfortunately, well, I don't know if that's unfortunate. That's just not the case for me. I have a lot of things that I work on, and this is just a small fraction of it. But if I had, more time, I would probably stage out a honey net just for fun. But so far I haven't. But honey docs, these are easy. This is stuff that you can deploy throughout your network on file shares. You can hide these in discrete places on your endpoints. Yeah, put it on a user's endpoint. If it's a company asset, hide honey docs, hide little, gold nuggets around their system that you can get detections on. So you can create a honey doc, and there's lots of ways to do it. There's the the asterisks here if you want to use something like honey badger. This thing is absolutely hilarious. This will stage out a doc for you that will, as it says here, actually run code. From a macro perspective, Funky, you can probably speak in more detail. You've actually done this one more than I have, I think, right? Maybe not. I don't want to convict him of anything, but this one will actually go out, run, and do a wireless assessment off of that person's system, and will gather all the wireless networks, all the SSIDs that are around them, and the IP address, and it'll take that wireless data from numerous open source databases for wireless, and in some cases Bluetooth, and triangulate where they're potentially at. So if you go, this isn't really in scope for the talk, but word driving is something fun that you can do. Here's my word driving rig and my my GPS module. But it is, I'm gonna have a brain lapse for a second. Wiggle, geez, Wiggle with one G, wiggle.net, I believe. Just Google wiggle.net or Google Wiggle with one G. But this is an open source database of people that are word driving all around the world and reporting all their findings into a huge database that can get leverage for stuff like this. Google does this. If you're running an Android phone, they've been doing this for years. They probably do it on iOS as well. Well, they will just, as you're driving around, they're collecting wireless data, wireless SIDs all around you. If your device loses its connection, it can at least use the data of what wireless SIDs are seen around you to potentially triangulate where you're at when you have a low or no connection, and various other use cases for that. But honey badger is one way to do it. You're actually running code on the system. Again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not going to tell you what's good, bad, or indifferent, or what you can do. Do this to your grandma for the laws, your brother, whatever you want. But this is a really fun one to play with. Just be careful, and consult legal consultation. That's not me, because I'm not qualified to give you that. Let's see what else they have in here. Actually, we'll pivot over to canary tokens because this will be a better one. Let's see. I don't want to show you that one yet. Act like you didn't see that screen. You go to canarytokens.org. This is a free kind of open source project to an extent. I don't know if it's open source necessarily, but it's a free project that's by Thinkist. They do enterprise grade canary honeypots, and you get their appliances. It's super, I don't know, super cheap, but it's relatively cheap for an enterprise. So if you're a smaller enterprise, can't afford much, Canary Tokens and Canary themselves with their honeypots a great option. But they also run this Canary Token service where they will host all of the C2 servers that are needed to be able to report back and grab information. So they have a ton of different tokens. I'm going to talk about a few of these later. But just while we're on the subject, you can go in here and you can create a Microsoft Word document. You can provide an email address. Everybody should send me spam so I can burn that email. I'm also PoppaShell with an underscore on Twitter if you want to be my friend. And then you can put a reminder in here that, whatever this is, they put an example like this is Sally reports Feb doc. You can just state where you put this doc at. And then when someone opens this, what it actually does, it uses something similar where they have down here their custom image web bug. It's just like marketing. Like when you get a marketing email, they'll put a 1x1 transparent pixel at the bottom of your email that will be unique to you. It'll have a unique string, unique name JPEG on a random server somewhere. And when you load up that image, they know that that unique email that they sent to you and is designated just for you, that you open that email. And that's how a lot of marketing emails will track you. They do something similar where Word doc, it's not just a document processor. It's almost like its own web browser nowadays. So it'll load, HTTP code without you having to do a whole lot. You don't have to click, run macros. They can just put a custom image inside your Word doc that when you open that document, it loads that image, goes out to the web, and lets me know that, hey, so and so clicked on that. So for example, Funky was doing me a favor. He was trolling me though and using Tor to do it. But earlier I gave him a link for this particular canary token. You guys can see the link for the token up here if you want to type it in and troll me, but I'm not going to be using it anymore. So, but this, when someone hits this, it will give you all their information. It'll give you the city in which they came from, the region, the organization that it's potentially tied to. It'll give you what's really awesome is their user agent string. You can see what they're potentially using. You get your memo, like your reminder. I put ADHD image because it's a 1x1 transparent pixel. And it'll give you more insight. Like in this case, it says, yes, this is a known Tor exit node. So Rick's not fun. I wanted to have him click it from his own home device, but I couldn't convince him. But ADHD actually has this built in where you can, they have a walkthrough where you can host your own Canary server if you wanted. They can show you how to do it within ADHD, or you can emulate that on a cloud box, whatever you want to do. Because here's the only giveaway is when you give the link. Let's see if I can pull one from earlier. Yeah, copy this code. Here we go. See if this works. So this is the link that I used earlier for sending to Funky. Just a random link, but the dead giveaway, it's Canary tokens, right? Anybody's gonna at least look at the link and see like, Canary tokens, what is that? And then they're gonna go look at it and be like, yeah, nope, not clicking on that. But you don't send them the link. You actually take this and you can embed this into a 1x1 transparent pixel that you upload. It could be a GIF, it could be a 1x1 transparent, it can be whatever you want. And then it'll tell you at the end of this that you can actually embed this into an image tag within a document, within an email. We've used this admittedly to do some of what Rick talked about in his previous talk, scamming the scammers, where we will intercept a known email that's going towards a CEO or whoever it may be. We'll intercept that, and then we will send them back on an email and be like, hey, they're busy right now. I will send you a fat check to whatever bank account you tell me to. And then in the footer, we'll just put a 1x1 transparent pixel, and you start to track this information from the attackers and start to get statistics. Yeah, sometimes they may come from a Tor node. Most of the time, they're not going to go to that lengths to do that. In fact, using just the Tor browser in itself tears down so many options and flexibility that you have as an attacker trying to channel all your junk through Tor. Most attackers are surprisingly lazy. Would you agree, Rick?
Definitely agree with that. I think they're lazy because a lot of times they're in these call centers, these shops. They're running their own business themselves. They may be going through a VPN service, but using Canary tokens, some of the things you have there at your disposal. I will say that there's another one that's called a slow redirect option, which will actually allow you to pull more data from their browser as it's trying to do this redirect, and it will actually determine if they're running into a VPN. And sometimes you get VPNs that leak your information. And this is a good way to collect that data as well, to say, here are the VPNs you're using. And you sometimes can possibly get a local host IP address off of their systems, which is not necessarily going to help you very much, but it is kind of fun to say, hey, I got your IP address. Is this it? And then they kind of freak out and run away.
Give them their private IP address and they still
Yeah.
freak out. Yeah, these are more down here. These are fast redirect, slow redirect, which is hilarious. Made me laugh the other day. More info is grabbed if you use slow versus fast. I won't get into too many details there, but canary tokens, super fun to use, super fun to play with, easy. Even if you just want to be lazy and not spin up your own canary server, just use theirs. You know, I will tell you from experience that if you send it in a 1x1 transparent pixel, you think like, oh, man, they're going to see that and not click on it. You will be surprised what they will click on and do. Most, non-state acting bad guys and girls out there are surprisingly lazy. I'll just leave it at that. But a lot of fun stuff to play with, or you can, send it to your mom, your grandma, your aunts and uncles, whatever. But honey docs, I got a little bit sidetracked, but I think I covered it initially. Let me pivot back. Share, resume. All right, cool. So honey docs, those are fun. Lots of things you can do with them. They can be as simple as a 1x1 transparent pixel all the way down to running a wireless assessment from their own system. And the point of that wireless assessment, I don't think I elaborated, is if they are on a VPN, if they are on Tor, it doesn't matter. If they're goofy enough to open that document on their system, it's going to beacon back and give you the actual information from where they are at that time when you're doing a wireless assessment. And that works in not just Word doc. It works in like LibreOffice, OpenOffice, and I think their documentation shows like 5 different types of Word doc frameworks that they can be opened in. Honey creds. This one is fun. So this is another one that's super easy. It's kind of like Honey Docs. It's just another artifact you can drop all over the place. And the idea, there's lots of different ways to do it. But the idea of embedding credentials, you can embed it in a memory. You can stick it in, the classic passwords.doc.text. Whatever their spreadsheets are where they keep all their passwords at. It's always disappointing for me to find those throughout any network I've ever been in. It's just inevitable. You're going to find something silly like that. And so you can just simply put creds in a document of some sort. Or you can, like I said, you can, and there's various ways that you can inject those into memory, or just as simple as they can be fake credentials. That's not in Active Directory if you're running an Active Directory, or if you really want to have fun, throw them in Active Directory, and basically you'll set them if you want to create a service account. So if you want to detect Kerber roasting, for instance, and in fact, let me pivot again. I should just like stay on my other screen. I feel like I wanted to have some formal slides though, so bear with me flopping back and forth. So here we go. Come on, don't fail me now, DM. I'm trying to click on the tab and it's not obeying my wishes. No.
That's okay. The demos gods were going to get you eventually. You were
I
killing it for a
know.
moment, and that's all
I'm
good.
asking.
We do have a question though.
We do. Nice.
Yes.
I was asking for it with so many tabs opened. All right, we're gonna click it one more time and then we'll answer the question and see if my memory catches up. All right. So Eric asks, so where are you normally setting these up? Are you creating a separate network off your home network or using cloud instances? Yes. Pick your poison. Yeah. So if you're just doing it for fun, and you just want to experiment and play, my opinion is, and it's like I could be a total jerk and like share my my DigitalOcean link and get all sorts of credits, but I'm not gonna do that because that's lame. But DigitalOcean, dude, it's like, or dudette. It's I need to have more gender neutral terms. I'm bad at that. Y'all. No, so I would say go to DigitalOcean. It's like $5 a month, and that's if you keep the box running all month. If you just want to run it for a few days or whatever, it's so stinking cheap. I told my wife, like, I don't care what you say, I'm putting $25 in the budget for me to play with honeypots. I literally like $25-$30 worth of DigitalOcean boxes that I had, like 4 or 5 various honeypot boxes all over in, a few places in the US and Germany and Japan. I forgot where I put them all. But that's what I'd recommend. I wouldn't hang them off of my home network unless I was set up appropriately to do so. You just didn't care. Like I just got a new modem set up and it has 2 interfaces on the modem, and I can actually pull 2 public IP addresses. And then come to find out, my cable box also gets provisioned as a whole separate 50 meg connection with its own IP address. So I have like access to like 3 different public IP addresses. So if I choose to keep those separate and I want to set up like a DMZ and have fun, then I could do that from my house if I wanted to, but I think it's just a lot easier to do it from cloud-based inexpensive stuff if you can afford that. But from an enterprise perspective, yeah, it's all over the enterprise network internally. We don't put a whole lot on the perimeter. I'll talk about that shortly, of some ideas that we have had that could be helpful. I'm not looking to deploy things that are going to generate a bunch of noise and be a distraction. If I'm doing it for an enterprise and not just fun, I want to have high fidelity, no BS alerts that we can action on and have confidence in. Someone asked me, where do I store all my passwords? I don't know if I answer that seriously or not. I will say this, I recommend using a password manager. There's lots out there. There's open source stuff that you can use that's just located on your own system. KeePass is probably one of the most popular ones for that. There's different ways to tie KeePass into the cloud by, storing your backup in XYZ cloud storage or whatever you want to do. And then you have like OnePass, LastPass. I forget the one that starts with a D that has like a icon for a deer or something like that.
Dashlane.
Dashlane, yeah, Dashlane. There's a lot of them out there. I recommend using really good long passphrase with 2-factor authentication. Authy's really good if you want something that's easy and cloud-based. I use cloud-based everything for most things, and that's only because I have a non-technical wife who I would like to find the balance of keeping our stuff secure and actually making it where she will use it. Because if I say, hey babe, you're going to use KeePass and put it in Dropbox, she's just going to throat punch me and keep using terrible passwords. So hope that answered your question. Feel free to hit me up on Slack and DM me or Twitter or whatever, and I will answer that further and give my deep, dark recommendations. Jim, do your end users ever find your honey docs, creds, etc., and credential manager, for example? And how do you keep the deceptions on the lowdown or explain what that is? What is a good answer without giving away that you're running deception technology? Killer question, something I've thought a lot about. So yes, they've been tripped up on, but not a ton. Super manageable. Like most of the time it's the network person doing a YOLO scan because they need to see if there's any IPs and they don't know how to use, XYZ IPAM solution or whatever. Or they're just like doing something real quick and dirty. But most of the time it's just bad IP tracking internally, and they didn't track something appropriately, or they're not sure what it is. And they just accidentally interact with it, try to figure out what it is. But it happens few and far between. And then as far as the other part of your question of like, how do you keep it all under wraps and on the down low, as you said, you can do it however you want. We particularly wanted to have both. We wanted to have genuine lateral movement detection. So if XYZ, uninformed user clicks on a link, opens an attachment, whatever, your attacker gets the initial foothold and they immediately start trying to pivot. We wanted to catch that type of lateral movement. We also wanted to catch any potential insider threat, because you don't want to write that off. It's always a possibility. I mean, I can think of like 2 recently, right, where you had like some dude who tried to pay off someone inside of Tesla, like $1 million or something, to just click on something as environment. Luckily he said no. I think there was another one recently that was like that. So insider threats real for I think anyone. And so what we chose to do is use roundabout terms. So like all the different nodes that we have throughout the environment, I'm usually referring to them as just security sensors, network sensors. Sometimes I'll just refer to them as lateral movement detection. So like that's what I kind of called the project, was lateral movement detection. I really didn't say a whole lot other than that, and just keep it on the down low. And then I don't really communicate it to very many people. It's a, for us it was a need to know. So usually some managers depending, and then some senior managers, but only as far as we felt like it needed to go. And then those who were on the technical end that we needed to interact with um, to get some of the stuff deployed. And even then, I kept it pretty low key. Hope that answers your question. All right, honey creds. I didn't finish all these. Which screen do I have up? I want to pivot.
Defense. So we see right now.
Yep. I want to pivot over to. Oh, I'm already on. So I already have cred defense up.
I see cred defense. Yes.
Cool. You're a great sidekick.
I try.
I appreciate you. So back to credentials. Cred defense. This is. It looks like it hasn't been maintained for a little while. It was fun to play with initially. This was done by, again, Black Hills InfoSec. I'll admit to being a fanboy. It's not intentional though. They just put out some really good junk. But Cred Defense was put out by a few people. I know Bo Bullock and a few others. He's what is he on Twitter? Daft Hack. He's put out a good handful of really great tools. But they put together this Cred Defense toolkit. It had a bunch of fun stuff in here. I didn't even realize that my tabs finally caught up. You can go through the Black Hill InfoSec posts that they had under their different projects, and it'll go through all the details of what this can do. They had a thing in here for detecting responder, but the one they had a way to do like open source password filtering if you don't want to pay for an enterprise solution, but you want to keep people from being able to use, winter 2020. Yes, unfortunately that happens. Scroll. Anyways, there's a section I'll talk to as I'm scrolling. There's a section on here that they talk about detecting Kerber roasting. And I mentioned a little bit earlier very quickly, but they have a process in here and a tool that's part of Cred Defense that they created that'll allow you to do set AD user. You wouldn't call it honey token, but you would put a whatever SPN or service principal name that you wanted, and you would create that fake SPN and embed that. That way, if anybody's doing any kind of Kerber roasting, they're going to trigger off of this SPN, and then you're going to get notified in the logs. It's going to write an event ID 4769 for interacting with that service account. And then you can pick that up various different ways. Their answer was they have a tool that you can run, this Cred Defense event parser that you run through in PowerShell, and it'll go through and detect, hey, look, looks like someone sprang the network. Oh, cool. Looks like someone interacted with your honey account. There's different ways of doing this. Let's see if all my other tabs are open. This is another quick article I found from Logarithm. It's old. It's like from 2017, so this isn't new information. People have been doing this for, I think it's kind of new about 4 years ago, roughly, doing a lot of deception techniques. But they're talking here in their article about injecting honey credentials into your computer's memory, just doing simple run as commands and injecting. These can be credentials that aren't even in Active Directory. It's not going to go check, but it's going to inject that into LSASS. So you could just simply run a scheduled task, or you could run it from a SECM, or you could run it from GPO, Tanium, whatever you have. If you're PS execing your face off to do all your remote work through batch scripts, I don't know what you do, but you could run this anytime that a system restarts, a server, endpoint, whatever. You could have it run and inject these fake credentials into memory, and that way if someone goes through and runs some Mimikatz, they're going to get picked up, wdigest, whatever. They're going to run through and pick up those creds, and these are going to be in clear text. They show an example here of California bang at pound. These were picked up in memory. Hopefully you don't allow Mimikatz to run in your systems, but if you do, they could potentially grab those out of memory. And then from there, set a detection on your endpoints. If you're collecting security logs on servers, on endpoints, whatever, just simply look for the username or usernames that you've been embedding into memory. You can also embed real credentials that you create an Active Directory. Just for sake of time, it's on my resources later where I tell you to go through the course that Black is InfoSec and John Strand talked about. He goes into an immense amount of detail, and I'll let you watch that for sake of time, of how to properly create a credential in Active Directory, all the different settings you should watch out for, like actually log into it. That way it doesn't say like the last time it was used was like 1970. Actually log into it, set a schedule where they can never log into it. So if someone does successfully get the password, they can't actually log in and do anything with it. You know, careful setting it as a domain administrator if you're not going to secure it appropriately, but you can go through measures in Active Directory to make your honey creds look super, super attractive. And there's lots of ways to do it, but those are various fun ways. There's another one that I saw. It looks like Ben 10. He's with Trusted Sec. He has a tool called Honeycreds. It looks like he actually updated it recently. So looks like it's still maintained. This is a way that he advertises the detect responder by, it looks like this is actually running a Linux server and continuously throwing out fake creds into your multicast broadcast traffic, and letting it get picked up by responder, and then writing a log, and then you can pick that log up with I don't think he puts much documentation here, but you can pick that log up with Windows Event Forwarding, whatever Beats agent, whatever you're using, Splunk Universal Forwarder, and so on. Shamrock, could you run something like this or Kushtaka with a CentOS remote ingester node used for log forwarding to an MSSP? This is America, and you can do whatever you want. Yeah, I mean, I don't see any reason that you can't. Like, if you can log it, you can send it wherever you want, forward it wherever you want. Now, you'd have to work with your MSSP to make sure that you're detecting the things that you want them to detect on, but I don't see any reason you can't. I haven't looked at Kushtaka. It sounds fun. Someone else in the chat said they looked at it earlier, looked cool. I'll have to check that out later. Appreciate you guys sharing that. But yeah, you can, if you can log it and you can forward it over to your logging system, your MSSP logging system, yeah, absolutely. You can pick up on it and detect it through various means. And credentials, that's an easy one. Like they probably already have content in your MSSP written for picking up on, you know, so many failed credential logins. It wouldn't take them long to say, hey, if you ever see a login for this username, that's a high fidelity alert. By the way, all my links are safe no matter what PoppaShell says. Do not believe him. That's a lie. If you disable LLMNR, and you should, watching these protocols can be informative. Yeah, I'll be honest. I've yet to run into an environment where they would let me do that, Jim. I don't know why. It's just you mentioned turning off those things, and they're like, well, something could break. I don't know if I want to do that. Yeah, there is some. That's not for this talk, but there's some really cool responder detection type of tools out there. If you guys want to hit me up in Slack, Twitter, whatever, we can chat about it. All right, let's switch back here and move on to our next type. Phil, how am I doing on time? So 8:20. I think we'll be good.
Yeah, you're good.
You guys had way more questions than I thought you would, and I'm very much enjoying them, so keep them coming. Honey binaries, again, you want to probably be careful with these depending on what you're doing. If you're in your own environment, you know, YOLO, I guess, but when someone's potentially picking those binaries up, moving them over to the attacker system and then running it, I think you need to be careful. So I think the guidelines, and again, take the training from John Strand. He has a free, like 3-hour, 3-part course, and then he has like a paid, I mean, stupid cheap paid course for like $400 for 3-4 days of 4 to 8 hour day training, like SANS level training. As a previous SANS instructor, I think he went through all the legal content, just a ton of really great stuff. But he goes into more details about legal lines that you can run. But if you're just using that binary to collect basic information, again, doing wireless assessments, beaconing back to a particular listener to gather very basic like IP, host name, system type, like the very basic metadata from a system, you're usually not crossing much of a line there. But again, consult your own legal guidance. I am not a lawyer. But there are fun things, like I know, and he talks about this in detail, but OpenSSH, or excuse me, not OpenSSH, OpenVPN has ways where you can actually run PowerShell, you can run a binary, you can run various scripts at logon. So you can actually stage out a real OpenVPN server, throw it out there on the net, let people connect to it. You can attribute to your company if you're feeling spunky, or you can just do a silly one out there hanging off the edge that's going to get picked up on Shodan or whatever. But as soon as someone connects the VPN, it'll start to run a script, run a binary. That's another thing that you can potentially do if you want to collect that information, throw it in your Intel and block those IPs or whatever you want to do with it. But again, ADHD, I feel like I'm showing too much screenshot or too much ADHD stuff, but there's ways in ADHD that you can generate honey binaries. Just another fun idea. Excuse me. Honey APIs, I will pivot back over for this one. But you can create honey API keys. And again, one of the easier ways to do this was canary tokens. So they have Slack API keys. You can go in here, you can put a reminder note, you generate it, face roll your keyboard, and then create a token. You can put the Slack API key wherever you want. You can put it, again, on a file server somewhere and just act like you put it somewhere silly. You can put it in GitHub if you're feeling froggy, whatever you want to do. But there's an API key. If this gets used and interacted with, they will then notify you. And if you have your own internal canary token server, it'll do the same. Same thing with, they have a Amazon AWS key. So they'll basically stage out a S3 bucket, has nothing in it. If they interact with that, it'll give you a notification. Has your AWS access key, your secret access key, everything you need to know where the region's at. Download your AWS creds and go throw those on GitHub somewhere. You could make it look like you accidentally leaked your S3 bucket and left it open and put some of your company's information. It looked like it's a oopsie from your company, and you can maybe gather some intel and potentially block some unwanted traffic. I think these are the ones that I haven't done as much because they can get a little bit noisy. But to each their own. Try it out, have a little fun. Ooh, that's a good question, Wirefall. Isn't that entrapment? Again, I'm going to credit John Strand because I'm just literally echoing his words, and I'm not trying to pretend that I said these, but he was mentioning on one of his talks, because someone brought that up, is if you're luring someone in, are you doing entrapment? Well, entrapment was pretty isolated to if you are getting someone to do something illegal. You're not necessarily getting someone to do something illegal. You're just trying to get them to connect to your network, to your VPN service, to your AWS, key, to your Slack, so you can collect the IP address, the indicators, and then block it. You're not necessarily trying to say, hey, here's some, I'm not going to say what I had in my mind. Here's some illegal images that you don't want to possess. You want me to send these to you? Like, nah, I'm good, dude. I don't want those. No, trust me, they're good. Take them. And then they take those and then go arrest the person. That's entrapment. I mean, what you're doing here isn't necessarily entrapment. Again, you're walking a fine line. You can stay on whichever side of the line you want to, but it's not technically entrapment the way that we're talking about. Now, if you're a Leo, you work for law enforcement, then might want to be a little bit more careful on what you're doing. You could easily fall into entrapment. Yeah, nice. Thank you for sharing, Eric. If anyone's curious, the Wild West Hacking Fest training, I can't keep track of where they're posting all their training. A lot of it's under Wild West Hacking Fest, but some of it shows up under Active Defense. But yeah, uh, I don't know when the next time they'll do cyber deception training, but Jim, do you dox your attackers, send them pizza with, with notes to ask them to please stop? Um, no comment.
Oh,
We've been known to troll them a little bit. You know, you only have so much time, but like, uh, go back and watch Rick Scamming the Scammer Talk. I think that'll maybe answer some of those questions. Some funny things that you can do. Um, I think it's in that talk, so I can kind of give that away. But there was one where he was doing where just giving the person complete bull and said that, you know, I really want to go buy you those gift cards, but I'm really running low on gas. You know, any way you could spot me some gas money. And the person was actually willing to send gas money through Cash App. Uh, Spoiler alert, we tried to get approval to do so and it wasn't allowed, and we were sad pandas. But absolutely hilarious, the fact that they were silly enough to want to send us some gas money to potentially go pick up some gift cards for them. So yeah, your level of troll is your own decision. We've been known to goof around a little bit on our free time. Hashtag sad pandas. Yeah, I think that covers Honey APIs. Let me do my screen share dance here again. Plow, Honey APIs. Honey Web Tokens. So this depends on what, you know, line of business you're in. If you're in like retail, hospitality, well, pretty much anything with a web presence, there's techniques around web tokens that you can drop in your fake websites, or even more fun, drop it in your real website. So if you want to track if someone's cloning your website, that's a big problem, right? I'll tell you a funny story that my wife was embarrassed, but it happened. Is it was Mother's Day. One year I was a jerk. I didn't really buy her anything. Wasn't on top of my husbandly duties, and we were just keeping it a chill Mother's Day and Father's Day that year. So what we kind of decided on, and she was on, I don't know if it's Instagram, Facebook, something, and she saw a nice ad for some popular jewelry company, and it was like a ridiculous price for earrings or necklace or something, like a too good to be true type thing. And it's an ad running on, I think, Facebook. She clicks on it, gets on the site, and it didn't have all the items from this particular jewelry store, but it looked just like their website. Um, and man, she couldn't resist, went through, clicked all the way through, and I get a notification from my bank saying that I'm about to do some sort of foreign uh, exchange um, on the money to like South Korea or something. And long story short, they had cloned Kendra Scott's website, tore down all the different items that they were selling, made it look just like it except for the URL, which who looks at URLs? She was excited to buy a $30, you know, earrings that normally cost $500 or something. But it happens all the time, especially in retail, where people will clone your sites and try to sell your items and sell knockoffs. And so with web tokens, if you can convince your, you know, leadership to do this, there's things that you can do to put in web tokens to your website. I'm trying to pivot again. Sorry for my pause here, but I was going to show you again. Canary tokens, because let's face it, they're awesome. So this is if you just have a fake website and you just simply want to put a web bug, have them load, keep that simple. And then there is another in here. Where are you at? Clone website. So you want to put a webhook URL, email address, whatever, reminder note, and domain of protected website. We'll do example.com. You can actually put this code into your web page, and then basically what it does is if this gets loaded from somewhere else that's not your actual domain that this website's supposed to be on, it'll then send you an alert. Only if that happens. So if they go clone your website and then they don't pay attention to your code. They just spin it up and do the minimum effort to stream down what they don't want to sell or don't have in their knockoff inventory. They'll start trying to sell to your customers, and if this happens, this will create a trigger and let you know about it. So pretty cool stuff you can do with various different web tokens to detect things. Another funny one that's not necessarily an intentional web token, but a lot of times you'll have your Google Analytics trackers and have your Google Analytics tracking code in your website. They're also very lazy and will not remove those. And then you can just go, do some Google Kung Fu, search for your particular Google Analytics code and find it on websites that don't belong to you. Dead giveaway of some super lazy attacker techniques. Anonymous attendee, have you thought of running a scam with Tinker? That actually sounds really fun, but sometimes he scares me. Just kidding. He is a fantastically hilarious individual, but he does scare me a little bit. All right, web tokens. What do we have? All right, honey TBD. This was kind of a troll, just kidding. But if you haven't noticed, there's so many fun and creative things that you can do, that you can dream up and think of, and just give it a name. If it doesn't already have a name, just throw honey in front of it and publish it, and people will bite on it. But there's so many different types of deception techniques that you can use. Again, honeypots aren't really used in enterprise deception much. They just call it deception because, like, I feel like honeypots has a negative connotation for most, or they think like, you think honeypots and you think just putting a bunch of honeypots on the edge of your network and making attackers mad, and that's not necessarily the intention. You can do that if you want. I don't recommend that, but doing it internally is what typically I recommend from an enterprise perspective. And if you're going to do that, then there's just a lot of fun ways to do it. But the point there is, you won't hear it talked about as honeypots. You're going to hear cyber deception. And I'll name off some companies that are out there in no particular order. I mentioned Ativo. Ativo has a full platform. TrapX is an OG, been out there for a long time. Symmetria, RIP, I don't think they're around anymore. Javelin Networks does some really cool AD-based stuff. They got bought out, like I said, I think by Symantec. Elusive is another one. And Clavio. I think Chris Roberts worked for Clavio and Ativo actually, but those are the ones that I know of that are enterprise, just in case you want to check that out and make deception a lot easier for yourself. Anonymous attendee is Tinker. Nice. Now I'm more scared. But yeah, there's some enterprise stuff out there that makes doing deception a ton easier. So, if it's something that you can fit in your budget, awesome. If not, there's also a lot of open source things out there that we talked about and shared, and there's so much more that you can dive into. If you don't want to do honeypots and honey nets, which are a little bit harder to maintain and do, check out docs, creds, binaries, APIs, web tokens, honey, whatever you want. I'm getting distracted by chat, I'm sorry. But yeah, and one I just noticed that I left out, and it's not in here, so I'll just kind of talk about it for a second, is honey ports. There's a few things you can do with slowing down attackers from a honey ports perspective. I won't pivot again to ADHD, but they're in there. I'm looking over. There's one called honey ports and another one called port spoof. And both of these can be pretty fun. So let's say you have a web server and it's listening on XYZ ports, but there's only certain systems that's going to be talking to this particular server. Well, you can whitelist those particular IPs, and then anybody else that scans that particular network for any ports, it's just going to lie to it. It's just going to give them so many ports, every potential port that they want to be open, just throw out them and just let it. If you run an nmap scan and you just run something like this, like honey ports all over the place, it's going to yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's like tar pits, right? And so Wirefall, imagine doing light recon on a network and scanning, and every time you hit a new node, it just got sucked into literally scanning and then investigating and interrogating every single possible port that's out there. And it's almost like a sinkhole or a tar pit for people that are scanning. And so, yeah, there's Port Spoof and Honeyports are two projects that are linked in ADHD that you can utilize. So, yeah, that would suck. So some say put those everywhere. You know, that's up to you what you want to do. But thinking about the trolls that you can get, but it's not even the trolls. It's not necessarily trolling people. It's literally wasting time of an attacker. If you have a pen tester or a real attacker in your network that's trying to scan around, like Wirefall said, you're not trying to waste their time per se. It's not about that, because that's a waste of the company's money if you're not doing that correctly. But when you can say like, hey, I watched you waste 10 minutes just sitting here on your scan, I'm going to let you know that this is what I've done, but go ahead and report that. Yeah, you whitelist authorized. Yeah, definitely, folks, peeps. So anyway, honeyports. That was another fun one that's in there that for some reason didn't make my list, but definitely a fun one to play around with. And then resources. This is where you can take a screenshot. That's PHS. I went ahead and linked their playlist. This has the intro to cyber deception that I mentioned. It also has their 3-part freebie intro to their course with a lot of content on there, and there's some other videos, like older videos. I think he usually tries to talk about it like once a year. There's the link to the current build ADHD 4 from Active Countermeasures. I mentioned Elliot Brink and DEFCON 23. That was his talk, Global Honeypot Trends. Really fun talk to watch. That's honestly what inspired me to first mess with honeypots. This was, a few companies ago, before I was even getting to use deception. Before I even knew deception was really a thing, I just knew about honeypots. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, you don't want to put them on the outside of your network, but it'd be super cool to put Kippo honeypots all over the network and, see who trips on them and get some really, good lateral movement detection, insider threat. And I tried to convince one of my previous companies to do that, and they thought it was a really stupid idea. So they're wrong. So watch that video. It was a really fun one. His blog posts aren't up. He had a bunch of like walkthroughs and stuff, and I don't think any of them are. He switched websites and didn't port those over, but still, nonetheless, the talk is fun. It's a good inspirational one to watch. A lot of really fun and cool, entertaining trends that he was tracking. And then, of course, I think you guys are Canary Token out by now. Ton of really fun stuff on there that you can use theirs or stage out your own. And then go ahead and check out the HoneyNet project. As you can see, I haven't even went through but maybe a couple of their projects, but they have so many fun looking projects on there that you could start with. Questions? Go ahead. If you, I'm pretty much done here. You can find me on our Pwn School Slack. I'm PoppaShell on there. I'm Papa_Shell on Twitter. You saw my email. I don't really utilize email a ton, so hit me up on Slack preferably, or Twitter. But if you have any wrap-up questions, I'd love to answer what I can. So I see them rolling in.
They're rolling in, man. You got them coming.
Keep them going, and we'll stay here all night, maybe. Wirefall, would like your thoughts on security benefits of obfuscation. My SSH servers on port 22 get thousands of hits a day. High ports, very few. Port knock protected high port SSH servers, none. Yeah, I see no reason that. I mean, it's just, and you already, I'm sitting there answer. I feel like this was a softball, Wirefall, but I will give my opinion nonetheless. Is yeah, I see no reason in doing that. No reasons in not doing that, as long as you're operating off of the knowledge that that obscurity is not security, right? You're not necessarily doing any sort of obscurity by obfuscating, but you are kind of alleviating some potential noise that you probably don't really want or need. I think he even put it right after you put obscurity is not security, but it's valuable. Yeah, I think definitely use it, but just don't operate in thinking that you are doing security when you're obfuscating or doing obscurity. Put your SSH pod on a high port that no one ever gets. I guess I don't care, as long as you remember that it's that way and you don't forget it, and then that lets you do different techniques. Port knocking, yeah, port knocking is a fun way to do it. I'll let you guys go Google search that and how to utilize port knocking. Michael, so what kind of job would you work with cyber deception in? Mostly defense. I think if I'm answering that question correctly, what kind of job would you work with cyber deception in? I think it's incredibly useful using cyber deception for defense. Again, some of the benefits that I went over in the early slide of wasting time with the attacker, gathering really great IOCs, tools, tactics, and procedures, indicators of compromise that you can act off of, block on, look into more. But yeah, it's a really super useful tool, and really like Rick was mentioning earlier, kind of giving me the softball, is really think through your deception story, decide if you want to use an enterprise grade tool. It saves a ton of time and it really lets you go deep. But if you can't, go look at a lot of open source stuff out there and decide what's some just initial things that you can do. Can you deploy some fake creds all over and then create a very basic high fidelity alert in your SIM or wherever you're logging stuff to say, if that gets used, let me know about it. Super easy. Dropping honey docs all around, super easy. There's definitely stuff that you can do, but defense is where I see it most useful. I'm a big fan of using offensive techniques for defense as well. Not to get too sidetracked, but think of like a project like Bloodhound. When that first came out, they're like, oh dude, you can run Bloodhound and get a really quick path to the domain administrator. This is so cool. And I agree, that is cool. But I immediately put on my defense hat. I'm like, bro, I'm about to go run Bloodhound in our entire environment and find out where we're most susceptible to attack, and shoot, now Tanium just put out, what do they call it? I saw the not advertisement, but I saw it on one of their talks. I think it's called Impact, where they're basically spinning out their own Bloodhound idea within Tanium, where they can assess, from a defense perspective, how potentially open you are to abuse in that manner. Bad configurations, too much permission creep. What are the questions? Anything in the chat in Packet? I don't know if that's a question.
There's been a few comments back and forth. A lot of the attendees are community just commenting to each other and stuff. I haven't really been too many questions. They've been doing excellent jobs by putting it into the Q&A.
Yeah.
Best attendees ever. 22
answered questions. I thank you guys for that. That's been awesome. I like the interaction, and I love seeing the chat too. And again, just to advertise, because I'm selfish and biased, but I think we've developed a really cool community in the Pwn School Slack. We were doing Slack before everybody pivoted over to Discord. So sorry we're not doing Discord, but both pretty cool platforms. But jump over into the Pwn School Slack. You can go to pwnschool.com. There's a link up in the top for Slack. I have a little bot that'll email you an invitation code from my email, and you can join up, chat, lots of channels, DM me, or just open up a discussion in general and have a good time. Yeah, there you go. Pwn School does not have a Discord. Sorry if I made that sound that way. We were using Slack before everybody else started using Discord, and we've never decided to make the pivot because we have, like, I don't know, I feel like nearly 600 people in Slack at this point. Phil, I feel like you can go ahead and kill the recording. We can hang out, answer some more questions, or shoot the breeze for a few minutes, but that is all that I have.